live December 30th, 2025. And the handbook for the recently deprogrammed has arrived. I have it here in inventory. And as we speak, I was just now preparing the packages to ship out tomorrow. So you will get your copy this week if you ordered from this particular batch. And I think I might have 5 or so more remaining. But if you are international, you will have to get them through eBay. Just because the shipping costs are very, very high. And Amazon doesn't deliver to certain areas. But if you check your inbox, you can see the books are indeed here. And I just got the package open. I added a little bit. I fixed a couple of things. And, it's just above 300 pages. And it's a consolidation of the most important ideas that have come out of the IPS think tank. By the way, if you're in the comments, just say hello and I will hand out a wrench. Adding mods. What's up, Waco Soto, playing Decoded? I put out a live stream notification, so we should expect a swarm. The title of tonight's live stream is the Jake Paul curse. Someone asked me to look into the car crash where Anthony Joshua, the one who just beat Jake Paul, was in Nigeria. His car crashed and 2 people died. And I saw him being removed from the vehicle. Wasn't sure why he wasn't wearing a shirt. Do boxers and fighters just walk around shirtless? I don't know. Was it staged? I don't have any reason to think it was necessarily. But looking at the scene and looking at the broader context, it's probably fake. I don't know. What's the agenda here? So I'm looking into it, and I came across this thing called the Jake Paul curse. So the Jake Paul curse is something that has been observed already. So he's fought about 13 people. Mike Tyson supposedly nearly died right before the fight. He had a bleeding ulcer and required all kinds of blood transfusions. Then, of course, Anthony Joshua, car accident where 2 people die. Nate Robinson hasn't been heard from since. I don't know if he's dead. Ben Askren suffered lung failure, nearly died. Tom Furry, marriage ended, career declined, life fell apart. Ryan Bowerland quit boxing, became a plumber. And Chavez Jr. was deported. So again, it just seems like 33 million people turned in to watch his fight, and it just seems like every person who has entered the ring with Jake Paul has come to some untimely end. Capture the Loop says, has anyone seen the stories of the flying squid creatures? I have not. Is it connected to the flying spaghetti monster church? There's so many of these parody religions. But when you think about it, they're no less valid than the things that they're actually mocking. All religions are equal. The dominant religion today is called mainstream mediation. But let me know about these flying squids. Anonymous says, I remember the Frank Mir curse back in the old MMA days. Right. I'm not really quite sure, but looking at it in context, could be. I mean, these guys are part of the club. Maybe they do have some kind of thing going for them. I don't know. But I looked at the car accident thing. 2 people died. I see nothing fishy about it other than the fact that he's got no shirt on. But I didn't look too deeply into the fight. But I did notice the the flagrant uses of the number 33. Make of that what you will. All right, so let's continue here. Lots of Scientologists hanging out in the president's orbit lately. That's by Eric Erickson. I noticed that there's like disagreements over which religion we should be afraid of, which one is taking over. You know, is it that we should be worried about Israel, or should we be worried about Scientology, or should we be worried about Islam and Islamic infiltration? In fact, somebody just sent me a link. So the mayor of New York is being sworn in a subway. So on New Year's Eve, Zoran Mamdani will be sworn in an abandoned subway underneath City Hall. So what's the significance of this? Well, as I've been talking about for some time, there is this consistent use symbolically of the subway representing the oppressed, the underclass, in this class warfare framework. And this has been used throughout the Batman and Joker movies, the subway representing this existential dread that the elite have, that there might be some kind of uprising. And this is reflected in a lot of the political rhetoric, but specifically in the Batman Joker movie, but also the Daniel Penny strangling Jordan Neely on the subway. There's a lot of use of symbolism throughout the meta-scripted tale we're being told, the movie we're living through. But the fact that he's being sworn in a subway does strike me as noteworthy. And if you're not familiar with the Batman Joker thing, it was most recently observable last year with the whole Luigi Mangione and Daniel Penny thing, where the left's vigilante is a villain to the right, Luigi killing a CEO. Meanwhile, Daniel Penny is a vigilante to the right and a villain to the left as he strangles a mentally ill homeless guy on a subway. And that juxtaposition was intentional. And there's many examples of Luigi and Joker overlapping in terms of the imagery, the archetype, the symbolism, the inferences. As similarly, Daniel Penny has been referenced in this context as a vigilante, a Batman solving Gotham's problems. Not a coincidence that as Luigi went into prison, Daniel Penny got out. But we've been talking about the significance of the subways because the Joker movie begins in a subway. You know, kill the rich is this overarching theme. But the Joker, a victim of society mentally ill, fell through the cracks. He kills some rich guys on the subway, and he's lauded as a hero. Well, that's kind of the thing with the Batman, where it starts off where he's in a subway beating up a bunch of jokers. But the use of the subway, of course, again, is just very much part of this framework of class warfare, left versus right, the oppressor, the oppressed thing. Portal Complex says Demolition Man and the Rebellion Tunnel People. Right. There was this two-tiered society, the barbarians outside of the city, like the anti-vaxxers, the ones who don't go with the program. Jamarin May says, we live in the land of confusion, an inverted and twisted world. Yeah, well, I think about it quite a bit, and I still am not convinced that this isn't the best possible arrangement, given what we are. Jamarin says, 2025 was a blah year with the CK thing being the focal point, boring AF. I disagree. I think it was highly interesting, and the Charlie Kirk thing was one of the best things to happen to media deconstructionists, probably since Sandy Hook. But I would say even, or the Boston bombing. But no, I would say that this has been really a very significant year for what we do. And it helped us illustrate a lot of the points that we've been making all along. But 2026 for me is the year that we really launched this book and we build out this platform, because we're right. And a lot of people just don't get it. And we're not building bridges, we're not holding hands. We want those who don't get it to remain fixed where they are so we can help create this distinction. But 2026 could be something of a disruption year for alt media if we do this right. So that's kind of the objective here, and why I'm focused so intently on this is that there is a purpose here. This isn't entertainment. This is something else entirely. And now that we have our best ideas consolidated in a manual, in a handbook that I can use to make my points, now the next phase is the whiteboards, the infographics, the breaking down of the complex into something simple and digestible so that TikTokified minds can grasp it. And what we want is friction. We want those who are invested in the old operating system to fight against it, to denounce it, to hate it, to cope and seethe and froth at the mouth, like Dave J when you tell him there's no chemtrails. But additionally, we want those who have already exited the duopoly, who see through the big psyops, to see the bigger picture, the context of it all, the meta script itself, the control over time, and we want those ones to join us. So yeah, we're definitely engaging in a bit of worldview. I guess you could say it's a confrontation, worldview warfare, but we're talking about this attempt to reconcile and see if those who are stuck in these orthodox belief systems and old conspiracy theories, if they're able to let that go, or if they will double down. And most of them are going to double down. I'm convinced of it. The programming is very powerful. But again, this isn't really something we're attempting to scale up on numbers to make any difference in the world necessarily. What we're doing here is we are gathering as many as we possibly can who figured this out to help us with the process of what I'm terming the great deconstruction. And this is the part that's going to consume 2026. And this is the lasting part. This is what will establish this third branch of media. The only place to platform ideas that are not totally underneath the control of their duopoly. So I have high expectations for this year. But last year started with, well, the drones over New Jersey. I mean, that wasn't boring. That was actually a great time to illustrate how we cannot rely on hearsay and on rando eyewitnesses and people making vague claims. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, there was this rumor that New Jersey was being swarmed by drones. And all of a sudden, people started uploading videos and they were going viral of these drone swarms attacking them. Well, it turns out there were zero drones. People were recording airplanes thinking they were seeing drones. And the media helped with this. They helped really enable this stupidity. And, thankfully, Mick West raised the standards and he said, if you're going to claim that you've seen a drone, give me the photo so I can check the metadata and cross-reference it with flight tracking data. And that's what happened. He found that every single one of these supposed drones was actually an airplane. Now, the point is this. Whenever somebody says, oh, I saw a space station, I saw a UFO, the standards are now, show us the picture, give us the metadata. And when somebody claims that they're a witness to chemtrails, I tell them, I don't believe you unless you provide evidence. And that means give me a photograph. And I offered, and nobody's taken me up on this, $100 for anybody to show me a photo of a chemtrail, and nobody's done it. Well, one guy did, and these are just obviously condensation trails from the airport down the street from him. But my point of it is, if you have the metadata and the direction, you can figure out which airplane it was. And then you can compare that with the weather data, the altitude, and you can determine whether or not those conditions would be conducive to persistent condensation trails. And that was the case with this particular individual's photos. But my point of it is, you're not going to see trails you're not going to see, quote, chemtrails absent the conditions for persistent condensation trails. So you have this mislabeling of a predictable and modelable phenomenon, and they still insist on mislabeling it. And at this point, it's just beyond ignorance. Bulbous Boxing Academy, here is your blue wrench. So anyway, my point of it is, we're no longer accepting weak claims. Like, I know somebody whose dog walker is related to somebody whose best friend knew someone who died at that event that you're irreverently calling fake. I'm like, I don't care about your 6 degrees of separation from the fake event. And we're the only ones who've ever pushed back on that, by the way. People used to say, oh, you can't talk about that event because I know somebody who died there. And then everybody would shut up and they would say, okay, our heart goes out to you. Where's your GoFundMe? Let's talk about normie news. And I'm like, no, ask them the name of the victim, challenge them. Because a lot of people lie because it's like piety. It makes them feel like almost like elevated, holy, self-righteous, like they're attached to it. And it's all just, I guess you could call it attention-seeking behavior, perhaps a symptom of narcissism. Notice me, look at me, and give me some of that loosh. But no, we have to push back against that. Thank you very much, by the way, Adrian and someone else who have picked up copies of the book. Again, I'm going to be ordering these every week in larger and larger quantities. The next objective here is to take these books to local bookstores and do readings. And these readings will be recorded for Zoom, probably live if I can get some assistance with the recording process. But the purpose of it is to bring up the way, like the news events of the day or recent events, to demonstrate how these things illustrate, or rather exemplify what the book is describing. So I could describe a contemporary psyop and then reference in the book the indicators or what about it would lead us to think that this thing isn't authentic. But I also plan to use the whiteboard and infographics, because what I'm trying to do here is describe a model of the world as defined by media with the various perspectives within the box. And people don't want to know that they're in a box. Like, they just don't want to know, and I get that. But, I had someone complaining, you can't label people MSM, MSM plus, MSM minus, because people have opinions all over the place. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you fell for the illusion of internal diversity, but we're stuck in big categories with subsets. But the subsets are in a predictable location within this bifurcated system. This political horseshoe model is real. And you have 2 essential menus for people to choose from. And there may be a lot of items on the menus, but the menus themselves are closed systems. This is not like an open-minded thing. People are too compartmentalized to be open-minded. And you can't claim open-mindedness if your perspective has been blinkered to remove a lot of critical information from your perspective. For example, when somebody believes the news because they see it on TV, well, obviously there's a flaw. You don't have enough information from a headline to know it to be true. So the best you can say is, I believe it because I have faith in Fox News or I have faith in CNN. But it's a faith-based thing. It's not reality tested. So you don't have enough information to claim to have full knowledge over this thing. And my point is, we're in a world of subjective belief systems. None of them rest on objective reality insofar as they go along with the world stage model. And this model rests upon an edifice of media fakery. And the fake events that we describe are beyond PR stunts. They're not hoaxes that influence a news cycle. No, these become persistent, permanent features of the world stage model. And so if you're not accounting for how bent everything is, news bent, history bent, manipulated, then you may not recognize how subjective worldview has actually become. And if you're a subjectivist or you're within the worldview's closed system, you have that as your perspective. Your perspective has certain boundaries. Certain things do not get included in your assessment. And so, yes, it's accurate to label people. It's right to label people and categorize them according to their points of view and perspectives. The beginning of wisdom is the ability to call things by their right names. And if you're not willing to, it means that you're, I don't know what it is actually. Some people are just very relativistic. Like they don't want to recognize that anybody has the right answer and other people are wrong, largely because they're probably wrong and can't admit it. But I am an objectivist. And the IPS think tank is likely the only objectivist enclave on the internet because the Ayn Rand objectivist society has always filtered its perspective through the mainstream mediation, which takes them outside of the realm of being strictly objective. But to be objective, you would have to be aware of the two timelines, the real one and the one that overlaps it, the fake events that are routinely inserted into our timeline. But if you're not making a distinction between the two, then you can't claim objectivity. All right, let's continue. So I did mention last night that I tweeted something in response to Nick Fuentes and Clavicular talking about looks maxing. This is probably one of the stranger things to come out of 2025, but it seems entirely inorganic. And maybe it's because Andrew Tate just got defeated and they're bringing in the next wave of manosphere influencers. But this is totally Patrick Bateman level thinking. But my tweet, I basically said that looks maxing is gender affirming care for the woke right. And what I mean by that, this is their own words, they're trying to obtain, quote, giga chad. So they have this idea of what the ideal male should look like. But their method of achieving it involves microdosing meth, hitting the bones in their face with hammers, and I think steroids, lifting weights or something. But anyway, this is what the far woke right are spending their time doing. Performative masculinity. Trying to increase their, quote, SMV, their sexual market value. It's surreal when you look at these characters. But this is the face of the woke right, which kind of suggests to me that the whole point of these characters is likely to take any sort of authentic opposition and run it into the ground, make it jump the shark. So I'm hoping 2026 won't have a lot of Nick Fuentes or Candace Owens in it. Mazel says, yikes, that is odd behavior, way too focused on the outer. Yeah, it's really strange. It says here, getting double jaw surgery. leg extensions to ascend. So they're talking about this as some kind of optimization, like they're like self-improvement, but it's very shallow, obviously, very judgy. I don't have a problem with it. People can do what they want. I mean, is it any, I'm just saying this is no different than furries. Just these subcultures. This particular one is, it's just an interesting development because of where it's arriving at and what its fixation is. But anyway, my tweet, which is a criticism of it, has been liked about 5,000 times, and I've been getting nonstop flack for it, which is what Twitter's for. You know, Twitter's a good place to test your ideas, to float them, to see what the consensus thinks or what the zeitgeist is indicating at any given moment. By the way, new fear unlocked for a lot of people. On December 11th, Trump signed the 6G directive to accelerate technology with AI, robotics, and human implantable devices. I saw these glasses you can buy, non-prescription, and it's like your AI companion that you just wear on your face. And all day long, you can use it like you would use AI, but in your environment, you could answer random questions. It records everything that you're doing. I mean, wearable is going to happen before injectable or implantable. But I'm not the only one, and I've been saying this for some few years, but others are noticing. It seems like they already have mind reading tech built into this. I don't know how exactly, but it's obviously there with the ads. You think about buying something, you need something, and then you get a notification from Instacart or DoorDash for that thing. Or you go to Walmart, you buy something with cash at a self-checkout, and you get home, and then you're getting an email asking for a review. Etheric Bliss says, way different than furries, it's self-mutilation. Is it self-mutilation? I mean, bodybuilding, physical exercise, athletics, extreme sports. These are all things that, yeah, they might involve some pain, but I don't know if you would specifically call it self-mutilation. I mean, wearing a animal costume, you could look at it in a sense as being something, maybe not self-mutilation, but psychologically, there's some mutilation there, alienation. And what is it with all these lone furries? We went from lone wolf shooters to lone furries. They said the guy that was shooting at Trump was into furries. And, you know, I hear a lot of normies talk about how Butler was fake. Like, they have no problem calling that thing staged. Now, there's questions as to whether the fireman died or not, but I see a lot of people are willing to go there. Mazel says, getting leg extensions sounds brutal and not necessary. Yeah, I've seen some people doing this where they extend their legs, but I don't know how that works in the proportions. Like, let's say you do it. So now I'm like, my ankles are like 6 inches taller, or my thigh bones, or whatever they do. Like, there might be some proportions that are still off, and then it's not going to help your kids. Your kids are going to still be born short. But the reason behind this looks maxing thing is that this guy's a black pillar. He describes himself as taking the black pill. So the black pill is deeper than conspiracy theory red pill. It says, yeah, it's all true, but there's nothing we can do about it. You could consider it nihilism and highly cynical. And so in this cynical view, looks are everything. And if you don't have this certain standard, if you're not like on their scale of 1 to 10, if you're not a, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something, you're basically not worth anything. They have this entire ideology built around it. It's definitely black pill. It kind of taps into the whole dark triad, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, narcissism. They seem to venerate Patrick Bateman. And a lot of people don't get it that Patrick Bateman is a parody. It's not meant to be a role model. He's meant to epitomize the worst elements of materialism and greed and sexism and all these negative traits. And somehow he's become this manosphere icon. But he was definitely obsessed with cosmetics, his appearance, uh, superficial outside, things. But sure, that's kind of what we're seeing here. Supposedly, rage bait is the word of the year. Rage bait, but I, I guess I've seen a lot of. I don't know if it was rage bait this year. I'm not really sure why rage bait would have been it. Because I see more engagement bait in general, not necessarily the ragey stuff. Like we're talking about manufactured outrage. There still is a lot of doominess. Oh, by the way, I watched the latest Naked Gun last night. With Liam Nielsen, and I mean, it's punny. It's clever. It's funny. It's slapstick. I think there's some jokes that probably didn't have to be in there, but overall, though, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. The guy Liam Nielsen is actually very funny at deadpan in all this stuff. But anyway, one of the plot points here is that the elite have this mind virus that they're going to unleash on society, where everybody's smartphone is going to be the vector by which this mind virus will get into your head, and everybody will go crazy. They will revert to their lower impulses, and they will start killing each other. So basically, like Disease X, like we've been talking about. Well, Disease X is in Naked Gun. And when they unleash this thing, the elite go into underground bunkers where they have the best in live entertainment, including Weird Al Yankovic. So we've got underground bunkers for the elite while the world gets taken out by mind viruses. So I was talking to someone about this, and they said, well, you need to see, and this is a movie that was just brought up the other night. Let's see if I can pull that one up. What was that movie about the tsunami and the nuke and the president gets taken out? It's in 2026. Someone told me I have to watch this other series, and it had the same theme. Some kind of situation where the elite go into bunkers and the masses are left on the surface to die. Kind of like Fallout. That's another one. Fallout is another one of these. Paradise. It's called Paradise. That's the one on Hulu. So in this series, a global apocalypse triggered by a combination of nuclear war-induced radioactive tsunamis. Season 2 premieres in February. So it's called Paradise. But anyway, Paradise, Naked Gun, reoccurring themes, Bunker, Fallout as well. Plain Decoded says, I like how they use... Yeah, I thought so too. Leslie Nielsen and Liam Neeson. Yeah, I know. That's got to be screwing with the Mandela affected people. Those kind of things confuse them. Dorian says, Leslie cannot be replaced. He was the original. Well, he plays his son, and they do homage to him. And obviously, no, you can't replace anybody in that sense, but I think they did the series justice. I think it was adequately funny. It was adequately funny. It was certainly funnier than Heads of State, which also I noticed was using a lot of puns. Okay, Thrustazar says they snuck the new Fallout episodes just in time to be 2025. Yes. And remember, the season 2 for Fallout's production was delayed because of the LA fires last year, which were compared to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you recall, we were talking about, it was in the new Thunderbolts, I believe. Yes. Let me see if I can bring this up. How they were talking about how it was like, they were comparing it to a nuke, that basically the fires were that bad. And then you had this movie coming out. It was one of these Marvel movies, Thunderbolts. And there was a character in there named Valentina. She's got the dark hair with the white stripe. And she looks just like Tulsi Gabbard. And so what was interesting here is Tulsi Gabbard had just visited Hiroshima. And she talked about being in the epicenter of the city, scarred by this unimaginable horror. But she looks exactly like this character at the same time from the Thunderbolts, Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, who also has some connection to some kind of weapon of mass destruction. The Sentry, and it's a void that blacks out New York. So you have Gabbard warning of a nuclear holocaust in this ominous video, and then her corresponding movie character unleashing this thing called the Sentry. I noticed that Moscow had a blackout last night. San Francisco had one like the week before. I think blackouts are going to be used whenever they do fake the nuke. When they Oppenheimer Seattle, they're going to have to do a blackout. They're going to have to do something in order to minimize the ability for people to talk about it until there's been enough confusion and deep fakery and false witnesses put out there. Jamarin says, could you do a top 10 or top 25 2025 PSYOP list? Yeah, let's do that. Good idea. So here's what we're going to do. Let's do the top PSYOPs of the month by month for 2025. Okay, so let's see. September, October, November, December. So January. Now, if I'm going to go down the list, like, so January for me, I think the main one would be the drones of Jersey. Major PSYOP, lot to learn there, and the fires. Then we have to get into, I don't know if it's March or April, the stabbing of Metcalf, Austin Metcalf, the twins. Then we have July, August, we'll be talking about the Annunciation shooting. Psycho Stu, Raja Jackson, that PSYOP, we'll have to talk about that. Hendrix, the racist in the park, versus Carmelo Anthony, the GoFundMe wars. That was a big thing. And then, of course, September, we got Charlie Kirk. October, November, Erica Kirk, Candace Owens. We got the Reiners. And then we got the multiple mass shootings with the usual hallmarks of fakery, you know, the Bondi Beach, the Brown University. But yes, we will go ahead and we'll do a PSYOP with a month rundown. And maybe we'll create a list of maybe some of the better actors and the worst actors. We got to give a Golden Globey to Arson, that guy that wore the cheesecloth and used up all the theatrical blood, who then returned to the scene of the mass murder to cry on TikTok. And we got that Robbie Parker guy, Skylar Baird, the guy who looks like Robbie Parker, who was a witness at the Kirk event. We need to give an MVP award to the Squib. I mean, they're quite literally changing the course of history with these old school special effects props. I mean, a squib. It's like the shot heard round the world. This is like the squib viewed round the world. This device made this magic trick real. I wonder if Trump was jealous. Like, why? He's probably wondering, why couldn't you have squibbed me? Why couldn't we put a squib in my hat? Like, if I was directing the Trump thing in Butler, he would have come up with the whole side of his face bloody. He would have come up looking devastated, but also strong. And then he would be carried off, and you wouldn't hear anything for like 2 days. Everything would just go black out. But they were able to minimize it and make it like old news right away. They really did not, like, the Trump thing did not have the impact of the Charlie Kirk thing. By the way, that clavicular guy, the looks maxer, said there's this thing called the halo effect, which means that people who are very attractive are protected because people don't want to destroy something attractive. The idea here, he said, is that had Charlie Kirk been more attractive, maybe he wouldn't have been killed. That was the argument put forth by Clavicular, that because he's considered by this guy's standards to be unattractive, it's like you have a punchable face. Well, apparently Kirk had a shootable neck, according to Clavicular. What a strange take. But he cited this thing called the halo effect. I've never heard of it. But that subconsciously they felt justified in shooting this guy because he wasn't a Giga Chad. Plain Dakota says there was also the ICE shootings after the Charlie Kirk. Right. That's good. Oh, yeah, that's right. Thank you, Deprogram through the Dick Cheney in November. So November's a big one. From 11/3 to the last week of the month with the burning towers in China, those burning hotels, there was a ton of 9/11 callback and references to 9/11 just filled up November. Jamarin May says, it's amazing how fast these things get memory hold. Well, this is why we're doing the great deconstruction, because that's all by design. They cram so much information. They want this deluge to just take away your sense of being able to put it together for yourself, so you outsource that. And what I'm planning here is taking all these events and reconstructing the meta script itself. We get all the fake events on a timeline, and then we firmly separate these two timelines I've been describing, the real one and the sequence of pre-scheduled fake events that will be inserted into our historic narrative. These two timelines need to be separated, and we will be doing so in this deconstruction, which is essentially going to be the news, major events, last 100 years in 3 columns. The mainstream version, the anti-mainstream version, and the off-world stage perspective, which includes the entire media ecosystem surrounding the events, concurrent, predictive, reinforcement programming, the directors, etc. Plain Dakota says, apparently the clavicular guy put a guy in the hospital by running him over in a Cybertruck. Yeah, he ran over a stalker, and then he said, is he dead? The guy survived. But had he been seriously injured, I think the guy would have been arrested. Complete psycho, but I think it's probably the meth that he's taking, because apparently it flatters your cheeks in some way. I mean, I don't understand the reasoning here or really the point, because he's probably right about how people are shallow and looks do matter in a lot of ways. But I mean, unless you're trying to be a social media influencer, being completely mediagenic, telegenic is not that big of a deal. And you can also use filters. You can use a number of contrivances if you want to boost your appearance or even have a more marketable face. So I don't even know if this is a useful set of skills, this looks maxing thing. I'd say it's a huge waste of time. Jameer May says 3-1 Atlas. Yeah, I made a meme about that. And it was this meme of these gigantic hamburger buns in space, but there's nothing in them. Because it was this huge nothing burger. And I'm not surprised that's what it became. Same with the Epstein story. But I'll put that in my notes. 3-1 Atlas. And you know what? The timing of that, the hype around that, and all these disclosure ideas, probably not coincidental. Plain Decoded says he's probably a world stage plant. Yeah, there's no way he's organic. You don't move in these circles if you're not essentially a crisis actor. And all these people are buddies behind the scenes. A lot of people have noticed this, that behind the scenes, Tucker and Owens and Alex Jones and all these people, they're totally cool laughing at the rest of us because they're a bunch of actors in a soap opera. I mean, psyops are not merely mass shootings and terror attacks and spectacular events with squibs. No, a lot of psyops are really just soap operas. Manufacturing public opinion by getting them engaged in these stories. Everybody that I know is talking about Erica Kirk like they know her and she's this horrible villain and she's pregnant with J.D. Vance's baby. They don't care about the truth. It's ridiculous. But now that's one of my hoax indicators. If everybody who doesn't pay attention to all these things is suddenly talking about it like they got a download, yeah, it's probably beamed into their heads by the immersive echo chamber where no matter what you're doing, you're getting the messaging. Jamarin says, didn't we take out a bunch of nonsense in Iran? Yeah, that's from the summer. And I'll put the note here, Top Gun 2 in Iran. And a lot of mainstream sources noticed how Top Gun 2, quote, predicted how they were going to drop bombs into ventilation shafts in Iran. But this is useful what we're doing here. This great deconstruction is going to make the case not only that we have these dual timelines, that they have merged real and fake, put us into a hyper reality, but it's going to make it very clear to anybody who's looking at this that you have to have that in your worldview now. The consecutive fake events and their impact on the now, and how the now, objectively speaking, doesn't resemble what everybody believes that it is because of these distortions. But what's more, it will make it possible for me to demonstrate, I think, it'll become very apparent how long in advance many of these events are actually planned. Like how far before it happens did the script exist? Did it go into the program? So again, we're looking at the theater of Psywar. When you go to a theater, you're going to watch some plays, you're given a program that will tell you what's going to happen at what time. So there's this hypothetical thing I call the meta script, which is essentially the program. And the program is the sequence of fake events to come. So it's safe to say that every major PSYOP of 2026 that we're going to collectively experience has already been planned. They already have the actors. They've already produced a lot of it. And they're going to be released in the news concurrently with some kind of entertainment version of it, some Netflix or Hulu show that will perfectly mirror what's going to happen. Like I'm making predictions right now. That is going to happen throughout 2026 with every major event that hits all the marks of being a hoax, a psyop that just checks all the boxes, all the hoax indicators are present. Whenever one of those events comes up, it's going to have something corresponding in entertainment. Just pointing it out. It's not even a, quote, prediction. We're describing the model as it exists. And there's a timeline for the implementation of psyops, which create these historic events that, again, are persistent, that become fixtures in our world stage. And the pattern is, and it's always been, predictive concurrent reinforcement. There's a pattern. And so you can look at the predictive stuff to get an idea of what's to come. And I'm seeing a great deal of content for this idea of a water-based nuclear attack, a submarine, the Kraken, the Poseidon, even the Hulu, the Tempest, the Storm. There's this growing reference. So to find out that Paradise has these nuclear tsunamis, yeah, par for the course. And of course, Godzilla, a metaphor for the nuke. All of these symbols have been cropping up in the last couple of years. It's been accelerating with Oppenheimer and Fallout. Dorian2112 says, I heard on another show that 3i is 999. We can go from there. Oh yeah, 3i Atlas. I've heard it had something to do, the third eye. I think it's like, I mean, like everything else, and I'm not saying it's real or fake, but the reportage always seems to have some kind of subtext to it with all these space things. So it's 33 billion tons. Again, why does it have to be 33 billion tons? I don't know. I think there are a number of other conspicuous things. Anomalously massive with a tail. So we have this 33 billion ton comet older than our solar system that just passed by. They certainly hyped it up quite a bit. And it perfectly coincided with Pluribus. And it reminded me of a third body problem. We've been getting hit with a lot of alien propaganda where they are arriving through our computers, through our minds, but they're not physically coming here. And I've noticed this blurring of the lines between alien and demon has been increasingly popular on the right. And it even includes AI. So AI, demon, aliens, demons. AI could be demons or aliens. You see, they're blurring this thing where we're just talking about some higher consciousness or higher intelligence and the form that it takes. And if aliens did arrive, the way that this thing is set up, the left wing will embrace them as benefactors who can give us some technology. The progressives will love it. The atheists will love them because, of course, this validates their point of view. And it's a very almost a spiritual transcendent thing. The archetype of lights from the sky, they come down and they're like angels. Aliens are always described as even androgynous, like angels are said to be. But then the right side of the political spectrum for decades has been told that the alien invasion will be an attempt by the government to false flag us into the one world order. So they've already concluded that the alien invasion is a government hoax or demons. So the right wing will go to war. You will see big trucks, MAGA flags, and they're going out to battle with shotguns to fight the aliens. And there's not going to be like this unity when they arrive. The same people who don't want illegal aliens do not want extraterrestrial aliens, and that's by design. There's consistency in the programming here, left and right. So it's on multiple levels, which makes me think that the alien stuff could also simply be propaganda designed to create certain emotional associations with the idea of the invaders that can then be applied to the terrestrial variety. Not a coincidence that Trump is build the wall, and Space Force, which also aligns with the Trump character in 1958 Trackdown, End of the World, the episode that predicted Donald Trump. where he's a con man who builds a wall to create some sort of defense against a cosmic threat, and then he gets arrested. And that's another thing we're doing in this deconstruction is we're going to reverse engineer not just the fake historical events, but the fake people. We're going to go through all of their, quote, predictive programming elements. And I've already worked on this a bit. So mind mapping out all of the characters that are openly based on Trump, we find common denominators. With Trump in particular, the common denominators with all of his predictive programming counterparts are 9/11 and or surviving an assassination attempt. But it's a very consistent pattern. Deprogrammed Truther says space is fake AF. The construct of space, as the public understands it, is a way for the world state church, this mass media induced paradigm, to provide an alternative or a replacement for the archaic concepts of heaven and paradise. Because atheists don't believe in heaven, and all these different religions have different versions of heaven, and they're not compatible. So what they've done is they've created this universal heaven they call space. And this is where mankind is going to go up as one. So I look at space and NASA itself as actually more about worldview, pageantry, and utopianism. The idea of heaven on earth, of perfecting the world, of going to space and living sustainably. These are utopian ideas. And space is this make-believe realm where you can have impossible things happen. And this is seen as a worthy goal for all mankind. And unlike the other religions where nobody believes in anybody else's miracles, the space religion had the man on the moon. The man on the moon put all mankind in the same paradigm. So no matter what your heaven is, you all believe in space. So space is like this meta heaven. It is the dominant heaven, and all the other ones are just archaic, old operating systems. That's why I think it's so intriguing that Wall-E by Pixar is basically a science fiction version of Noah's Ark with the space ark. I'm like, they're using all these Old Testament myths and New Testament and putting them into the mainstream movies with a science fiction veneer. It's all syncretism. It's not that they just don't have any good ideas, so they got to borrow from the Bible. No, this is about replacing traditional religions by stealing the archetypes, by blending it together, creating this syncretic science fiction, mystery Babylon composite religion, which is what we're in. Nasatology. Plain Dakota says, no king's jewel heist. Yeah, that was a good one. We'll put that in there too. So the crown jewels get stolen during a No Kings protest, and the Netflix corresponding show, Lupin, has the characters in the Louvre, same place, stealing the necklace of Marie Antoinette, who lost her head during a No Kings protest. And that week, because of the lavish parties at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump was represented on the Drudge Report, and this was a Governor Newsom created meme. It was Trump as Marie Antoinette, who is depicted as decapitated at the Paris Olympics. But you get it. Marie Antoinette's necklace, crown jewels, no kings, Trump as a king, and the sentiment here, like the anti-CEO stuff, the anti-Musk stuff, that's been a pretty big theme since like fall of 2024. Plain Dakota says NASA's space helmet equals ridiculous cult hat. Well, what you're seeing with the astronauts in space, they're levitating. And levitation is like an early Christian miracle. They're levitating. They've risen above the world. They have God's eyes view. They can see the whole world. And from up there, we're only one. They call it the overview effect. They say when you see the Earth from this far away, you rise above politics, you rise above religion, and you just see the need to save the planet. And so this environmentalism is another aspect of this religion where you replace God with Gaia. So you make God mad with wickedness, God floods the world. You make Gaia mad with pollution, ocean levels rise, and Gaia floods the world. By the way, I think I'm going to go watch the new Avatar movie tomorrow. Avatar has been used to recreate the blue marble effect, Gaia worship, the idea of the planet being sentient, and the West is like the enemy of the Earth's consciousness. The West is this caricature in James Cameron's view, but Cameron is a major league metascriptor, as we've often talked about. So when we get into this deconstruction, we're going to analyze and reverse engineer these fake characters and the directors and show how interconnected it all is. One of the things that we had uncovered in the last couple of years is how much you'll see where a movie that contains some element of quote predictive programming will also predict or foreshadow other events that may not have happened at the time when people notice it's the first examples. So for example, movies that predict 9/11 that came out prior to likely have some kind of 2020 reference built into it. But it's all about the patterns. And if you're stuck in the 24-hour news cycle and you approach every day like fake or real, and you're not thinking about how it's been consistently fake, and even if it's not fake, it's framed by fakery. It's framed by whatever is omitted, but also by the presuppositions built into its perspective, which is everything that happened before is real. So what we're going to do with this great deconstruction is create a timeline to maintain that sense of continuity between events and to show the relationship between entertainment and fake events. All right, let's continue. We were talking about the Jake Paul curse. I thought it was kind of conspicuous that Jake Paul and Andrew Tate both got embarrassed at the same time. Just horrible fights. Almost seemed like some kind of humiliation ritual, like iconoclasm. With Andrew Tate in particular. I mean, how he became a paragon for masculinity, I don't know. You know, this is at a time when the MAGA QAnon right was all about, we got to stop the human trafficking. We got to stop the Epstein types. Meanwhile, they start venerating Andrew Tate, who has a stable of OnlyFans girls that he's trafficking and exploiting. Like he's literally a human trafficker doing something worse than Epstein. And he's got fans by all the people who want Epstein's files released. I'm like, how does that work? Yeah, Tate was worse than Epstein. Now, what about Russell Brand? Because, I mean, I only know accusations. I don't know for sure. But I've seen him baptize a lot of people. I wouldn't want to be downstream from that. But I suppose he's done enough baptisms that maybe he did do all that stuff and maybe he's been purified. Is that how that works? Or is this all just performative? Trying to soften his appearance before the big charges drop. I mean, it's almost like it's damage control in advance. But he has this image that he's fostered of being this cult guru. He's got the 33 tattoo on his arm. He's always got his shirt open. And, you know, a lot of it's obviously image, but he's really sold himself as this internet Jesus figure. And I'm not convinced he believes any of it. I don't believe Candace Owens believes any of the stuff that she's a part of. I think it's all performative Christianity. It's all symbolism over substance. That's how you have, I mean, think about it. These people are liars and deceivers operating on a level that is outside what the public understands when it comes to propaganda. We're talking about psyop operatives, agent provocateurs with big media platforms. So you got Jack Posobiec, and he's rocking the crucifix. He's got this crucifix that he's waving above the America Fest crowd, and they're all cheering at this thing. And I'm like, this guy is doing it for the symbolism purely. Because if he really believed any of this stuff, if he believed in that religion, he wouldn't be involved in psychological operations, in mass mind manipulation. So any of these influencers who are connected to the psyop entertainment complex uh, are deceivers, bottom line. And so you can't really take their religiosity seriously. It's amazing what people fall for, but we shouldn't be surprised. I can say with certainty that Charlie Kirk didn't believe anything that he said, but everything he said was engineered to appeal to the audience. They know their audiences. That's why Tucker Carlson can walk out there confidently claiming that he was groped by an alien because he knows that his listeners will believe it. Candace Owens is the queen of gaslighting and innuendo, insinuation, and she doesn't have to be accountable for anything that she says. It's all about, I don't know if it's just attention or drama, but nobody's actually connecting any dots. It's incoherent. It's pretty amazing where it's gone and how far they've taken it. Most people have really bad taste in conspiracy theories. And the problem with all these conspiracy theories is they're not even rightfully described as theories because they're not coherent enough. They don't lead to anything. They can't be falsified. So they're not real theories. But what we're proposing, and this is not theory, this is actually an authentic conspiracy that's successful. What we're describing here is that media, entertainment, politics, these things are not what we're told. They're not as compartmentalized as you would think. But what we're describing here is this active conspiracy to control time, total control over history. And that's a better why than all the vague conspiracy theory conjecture about who controls the world and why they're doing it. Control over history through the proactive creation of history itself. But uh, this is very Orwellian, and it's successful. It's ongoing. What's that quote? History has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. Here we go. These are from Orwell. The most effective way to destroy people is to deny and obliterate their own understanding of their history. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. So when we're talking about fake news events and the insertion of simulations into our timeline, we're talking about control over the present with events that become grafted into the history books, that become baked into our Truman Show. So they're controlling the past because news becomes history. Their fake news becomes our fake history. And they control the future in this way. But it's beyond just retroactively changing things and retconning things to suit contemporary interests, but it's actually about the proactive creation of history. And one of the things that's going to be revealed in our great deconstruction efforts here is not only the long-term planning, but what this suggests. Like, what are the implications of this level of creative control over history itself? And what does it invalidate? What does it reveal as rigged and bullshit and not worth paying attention to? And really what it's about here is reallocating your resources. You only have so much bandwidth. So what difference does it make? You find out certain things aren't worth fighting for or over. So you allocate less loosh in that direction. You kind of tune it out So you intellectually respond to it, you understand it, but you're not reacting to it emotionally. So there's reactivity and then responsiveness. And the reactivity is they believe the headlines, they respond, they react, they're fighting in the info war. The skeptical approach is not to react, to suspend reaction, and then respond when the facts have arrived. So people may want to cling to the illusion of control that they get through participating in politics and tweeting and stuff and going to rallies. So I understand that because these are traditionally thought of as this is how you express your power, you vote. And it's like, there's no harm in letting that go. And you're deceiving yourself if you're not considering the full implications of what we've uncovered here. And that's the part that I'm revealing, because everybody knows about fake events and psyops, but until you put it all into a timeline and look at it long term, and then consider the implications of the long term planning of this, you may not arrive at a comprehensive view of how totalitarian this actually is. And why I say it's the only conspiracy worth talking about. All of the other ones are stale, recycled, pre-paved rabbit trails, truth or bait. And then you've got the Q pipes, the Kool-Aid at Alex Jonestown, all the pills, and all of the pills just being a subset of far right politics. So you're basically getting involved in the political system by getting involved in any conspiracy, because eventually you're going to fall into the harder stuff. Oh, blue pill's not good enough for you. You're still thinking. They give you some red pill. Eventually, you get to the bottom of that, and it's the J pill. And now you're listening to Nick Fuentes, and you're looks maxing. All right, let's continue. Now, we're talking about reverse engineering characters that are involved in various psyops, world stage characters, but also want to do deeper studies into specific actors and actresses and how they carry various archetypes with them across multiple movies. And recently, I was listening to Elon Musk talking about how they were filming Iron Man 2 at a SpaceX factory, and Scarlett Johansson was there. And what that got me thinking about is how she was in Fly Me to the Moon about faking the moon landing. And she was in Asteroid City, which kind of tells the story of Stanley Kubrick and insinuates a lot of these things. And there's some other elements there as well with that particular actress. But as we go through these, you'll see that they carry certain repeated themes across multiple movies. Recently, I was talking about Ed Harris and Christoph in The Truman Show, the Man in Black in Westworld, or Kane in Top Gun 2. How you call it typecasting, but I talk about this as archetype casting, where it's beyond just the typecast. It's like there's something else that also carries onto their world stage persona. It's very apparent with Jim Carrey, for example, who has been associated with the Dog Star and Sirius, the number 23, and Illuminati stuff for a long time. And his archetype could even be the Fool, the Fool character in the Tarot, which is a representation of somebody waking up to the fact that they've been deceived and they're beginning the journey of awakening. And that's what Truman is in a lot of ways. He's a fool until he realizes that everybody and everything is a lie. And then he begins his journey. So you have these like somewhat profound subtexts that delve into the occult or spiritual concepts that are embedded into so many actors. When we get into the Tom Cruise 33 stuff, even that is, it's all sun worship. It's all the solar hero archetype. And that's a consistent pattern with his work. And it all ties in, of course, to Scientology, which You can laugh at it, but it's sort of this Gnostic science fiction space religion thing. But remember, if you haven't opted out of it, you're a NASAtologist. So what's the difference? They're both space religions. The only real, I guess, difference would be Scientology has better actors. Oh, speaking of Tate, when Tate went under house arrest, the movie Speak No Evil came out. And the director said the villain was based on Tate. I watched the movie. I didn't see it. I mean, I didn't see the resemblance, but that's what the director said. And it was just a coincidence that when the movie came out, he happened to be put under house arrest. Just another example here of how, this Andrew Tate scandal is likely all fake. I tend to think the same thing with Russell Brand. Like, I really don't know if I believe if any of these things are real. I don't even believe in the Epstein Island story. Like, I think it's mostly soap opera. I don't believe it's actually true. And they leave the story out there because it lends credence to the far right's concept of America being compromised because of the Mossad and its operations with Epstein. Like, it's a cool story. Tom Clancy probably wrote it, but I don't think it's real. And it's just become this stale political football. And every other month, it's like, oh, the Democrats did it. No, Trump did it. And it's all, if you ask me, it's all just a rumor-based psyop. It's just, there's no substance to it. Mizell says a YouTuber, Tool or something, did a Scientology deep dive. Yeah, I would describe Scientology as, in many ways, very Catholic. We're talking, or like the Gnostic Catholic concept, the OTO stuff, but science fiction. But the way that it's actually set up, it's built around quarantining. It's about a distinction between the saved and the unsaved, the clear and the unclear. The idea of the world is already infected with a pandemic of mind viruses. They call them engrams. And so you have to get rid of your own mind viruses using their process, their auditing. And then once you're clear, you avoid catching new ones because you're always absorbing them passively. That's the idea of the mind virus. That's kind of built into their whole program. So then eventually you have to separate from the people who are carriers who won't get clear. So now you're surrounded by a bunch of clear people and you want to clear the world. But it's really built around the quarantine idea and trying to get people to recognize that they're all contaminated. And I've described this quarantine model and the concept of the pandemic outbreak as a way of reintroducing into the modern paradigm the notion of sin and saved and the unsaved. It's very much like whether it's a virus, a mind virus, an engram, it's the same kind of remediation. In other words, quarantine the believers and do something about the other ones. And it's about purification. And I think we're just about there again. I think the next big thing is going to be the lockdown of the internet, analogous to how we locked down in 2020. So, in other words, some kind of measures put in place to deal with mind viruses. I think that's what's coming next. And it may even be to confront the problem of deepfakes, but I think it's going to be more geared towards censorship, specifically of the right wing. But we'll see where that goes. Disease X still seems to be on the agenda. And as I mentioned, the Naked Gun movie revolved around this idea of essentially a mind virus that causes everyone to revert to, I guess, some kind of, here it is, the infection. Here it is. It says the villain, it was I don't want to give any spoilers, but it comes out through the phones. So the phones are the way that this thing transmits to everybody, which is kind of believable. That's kind of how it happens, if you think about it. All right, well, I'll continue to upload archives nightly. I want to say thanks to those of you who picked up the book. I'm shipping out the copies that I have. I'll process the remaining orders tonight. I'll put a link below. I think there might be one or two more left. And then I'm going to roll it over and order more copies for the next week. And we're going to begin the next stage, which is, it's not about promoting the book necessarily, but it's about promoting this framework, this model of media, this perspective, the so-called off-world stage perspective. And I would argue here that if someone takes that perspective, even as a hypothetical, they're probably going to stay there. It's like the overview effect. You go far enough away from it, you see the big picture, it alters your perception of it when you go back down. And I think this off-world stage perspective is irreversible. I call it mind war inoculation. You're susceptible to mind viruses as long as you're a passive consumer of media. And the truthers, the alternative types, imagine themselves to not be passive because they're so triggered. But no, you're actually just, like I described, dream world and a nightmare. They're both asleep. You're still passive. It's just more intense. It's more agitating. It's more provocative. You can only consider yourself to be an active consumer of media if you're deliberately and consciously suspending reactions, suspending judgment, suspending reactions, getting more info, and then composing a response based upon the available facts. And we often arrive at the position of the informed disbeliever. I don't believe it, not because I haven't looked into it, but because I have looked into it deeper than you have as a low information believer. So what we're really doing here is we're taking informed disbelief and confronting low information belief. And we're, cause we can, in the arena of ideas, we can see which one has more validity, which one carries more weight. All right, my phone's going to die. I've exhausted all my chargers, but I'll be in Discord the rest of the evening, and we'll be preparing for, again, what I'm calling the Great Deconstruction. We need to start talking about it in Discord so we can get the visuals and the flyers, because this is kind of a recruitment thing. We want people to be involved in it. When they see the value in it, they will want to be. And what I want to do is organize how we're going to actually approach the process of it, because our Discord server is already a fake news wood chipper. But now that we have access to AI, Perplexity, etc., the creation of this account of the last 100 years of all the major fake events and the relevant connected information, that's doable, it's achievable. But the more people we have on board, the more effective it will be. And this is irreversible. These connections are not arbitrary. They're not cherry picked. We're unveiling the structure, the architecture of the world stage itself. And as these things are elucidated, you can't put it back away and minimize it and dismiss it. I would point out the Charlie Kirk thing, the Erica Kirk conundrum. They've done irreversible damage to this argument that these are all mere coincidences by being so precise, as we'll be demonstrating relentlessly throughout this process, because this is a consistent facet. And we have a continuity of awareness. We don't have Westworld syndrome. We can look at the present with a frame of reference that includes what came before. Mazel says, I think breakdowns of shows or events and modeling like other channels would get people interested. Yeah, actually, you're right about that. I need to formalize my movie reviews, like a Metascript breakdown of fill in the blank. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to go check out the Avatar. I did a breakdown of Avatar 2, and it was incredible. Not my review, the movie was. And the way the movie mirrored that Atlanta City, Cop City riot. Classic James Cameron, major metascriptor. But anyway, we'll be in Discord, and I think you're right. I'll take your advice on that. And then we're going to come up with a list of the psyops of the month that we will review tomorrow on New Year's Eve.